Hi, and welcome back to Democracy Cracks. In this mini-series, we examine the fractures in our democratic systems and what we need to do to heal them. In the past 2 episodes, we explored the foundations of political trust and how disillusionment has become such a powerful force in a lot of people's lives. But today, we're going somewhere deeper. How does life after trust look like? This is particularly important to me, and I'm sure to others, because I've seen firsthand how distrust can pull people we love toward polarization, extremism, and conspiracies. But as we've already discussed, varying levels of trust can be destructive, but they can also disrupt, sometimes in surprising, creative ways. So in this episode, we'll look at what really happens, concretely, when trust weakens, how citizens react, and what risk, but also opportunities, can emerge from that void. Let's start with an obvious symptom of a democracy in trouble: people walking away. Imagine empty polling stations and falling turnout. It seems like the whole infrastructure of democracy is being left behind. And yes, for sure, this is part of the picture. In many European democracies, turnout has fallen by 10 to 20 percentage points since the 1990s. But I guess you know the drill by now. Reality is never that neat. Remember Daniela? When I talked to her, she argued that disengagement doesn't follow a simple equation, that low trust doesn't automatically translate into low turnout.
What I can say from our ActEU data, low levels of trust happen in particular when there is already going something wrong in a society. So, for example, if we live in a period where we have a lot of crisis, citizens also feel that they do not want to engage in the same, or they do not want to put as much effort as they did previously into their political participation, for example. Political participation is a difficult concept. So political participation can be participating in elections, but it can be also be participating or attending a demonstration. It can be raise the hand or like something on Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. What we can see is that if there are low levels of trust, people are less motivated to generally engage with politics.
So there is evidence. Electoral disengagement is rising across Europe. Take the European Parliament's 2024 elections. The institutions proudly announced the highest voter turnout in 30 years, almost 51%. But the picture is actually grimmer. Compared to the previous EP elections, a majority of countries experienced a drop in participation, sometimes by more than 10 points, like in Greece, Spain, Slovenia, or Slovakia. Participation even dropped by 28% in Lithuania.
Wait, what?
So this disengagement is not happening everywhere in the same way, and certainly not for the same reasons. Electoral participation is becoming more unequal. ActEU has shown persistent gaps between social groups. For instance, between younger and older voters, between citizens with higher or lower education levels, and people in precarious socioeconomic conditions who are consistently among those least likely to vote. So when trust erodes, walking away from the ballot box doesn't happen randomly. It happens first and hardest among those who already feel unheard or excluded. And that is in itself a democracy problem, because when the same groups keep voting and the same groups keep staying home, democracy slowly bends towards the voices that remain. But as Daniela hinted, stepping back from voting does not automatically mean political silence. Before diving into this apparent paradox, Let's first continue exploring what policy without trust looks like. If citizens stop trusting the system meant to represent them, what happens inside the machinery of democracy? Well, things can get messy. Governing without trust is like trying to steer a ship without a compass. Every way feels bigger, every decision riskier, and every compromise suspicious. We see this across Europe. Declining trust is strongly correlated with rising support for parties that promise so-called radical change. Political scientists call this elite challenging behavior, which means a shift away from elite-directed participation, like voting for mainstream parties. And that's exactly what Daniela described.
But of course, it can happen that you can participate in an election, vote for a party, maybe, for example, a so-called challenger party, so not the mainstream parties, but the extremes. And then you would, I guess, your motivation would be to vote for such an extreme party because you want to change your country, your society, and politics in your country.
And this goes beyond electoral choices. Low trust changes the whole dynamic of policymaking. In countries like France and Germany, when mainstream parties get discredited, it almost always coincides with legislative deadlock, meaning laws are harder to pass or coalition more challenging to create. And all this because consensus is so much more difficult to find. This is not universal, of course. Institutional design, such as electoral rules, parliamentary practices, or coalition mechanism, they can all protect some systems from paralysis. But another thing is clear. Public acceptance of policies collapses when trust is low. So it's not a nice-to-have feeling. It's the fertile soil that allows policies to land, be debated, and be adjusted. When that soil dries up, people can turn toward parties or movements that promise to break the system entirely. And we still need to explore another layer. What happens socially when distrust becomes the norm? I don't know about you, but I've lived most of my life with the deep conviction that even when we disagree, there are some basic truths that unite us. But in recent years, it has started to feel like everyone lives in different realities, like we're not even speaking the same language anymore. And once different parts of society stop sharing the same basic reality, the social fabric begins to disintegrate. As we've seen in the previous episode, polarization rises. But not just over political ideas or policy choices, in how we relate to the people who hold them. It seeps into everyday life, shaping how we look at neighbors, colleagues, and even family members who think differently. When I spoke with Daniela, she perfectly described this narrowing of our social and political worlds, this trend of talking, arguing, and even listening, mostly to people who already think like us.
This happens when polarization of societies happen, that we do not trust others or only particular groups of people. So we might trust then, in particular, people of our ideology. So if I would say, okay, I'm the more green left person, I have a higher probability to trust other green left persons, but I would not trust right or center right people. And this is something that is actually really not good for democracy.
And once again, this is more than just a feeling. It's not like I want to take us back to the nightmare of the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's a perfect example. Belief in conspiracy theories around vaccines or governmental intentions was consistently higher among groups with low institutional trust. And conspiracy theories don't appear out of nowhere. They fill the vacuum left by settling distrust. They are attractive for a reason. They question the very basis of how we understand science, institutions, and even reality itself. Their simplicity is seductive. If you've lost faith in the institutions meant to guide and protect you, then, of course, the wildest explanation can start sounding more logical than the official one. And the consequences can be dramatic. A world in which personal belief outweighs evidence has a special name, one that Kelsey told me more about.
We're also living in a post-truth world, and a world where experts are actually hated. It used to be that even if you didn't have the same opinion, most people would kind of listen to an expert. And now we're seeing the rise of the anti-expert. So you kind of have two separate issues there, which is people aren't getting the same information and they're clicking on things that are making them like reinforce what they think is true. But then you also have this rise of doing your own research, which really kind of came to a peak during COVID, but it stayed. So people that even if they read or hear opinion that's empirically true, they won't believe it. And so that has a huge issue for, as I said, democracy represents citizens. So if half of your citizens are in basically a fog of disinformation and the policymakers are reinforcing that, then how do you get out of that?
And this is very dangerous. Some studies show that those who believe in conspiracy theories are also more likely to be in favor of authoritarian alternatives, which means that distrust can sometimes be a driving force for political radicalization. So it's no longer just about disagreement. It's about fragmentation. And there is another layer to this, because we also live in a digital environment. 60% of the world population uses social media. This represents over 5 billion people. And on top of this, 42% of young people in the EU use social media as their primary news source for political issues. This means that the perception of a crisis can vary a lot depending on how platforms amplify certain voices. And on that, Kelsey shared something very powerful.
I was kind of checking in on some things just out of curiosity, shall we say. And immediately my entire algorithm has changed. I'm seeing insane things and it's just being reinforced and reinforced. I was personally alarmed at all of these echo chambers and I've deleted X. I've never really used it. I don't go on Facebook for that reason. I checked it just out of curiosity and I was astonished. And that's where the echo chamber issue comes in. I actually think the echo chamber and polarization, it's two sides of the same coin. Seeing it develop in real time and realizing all of the AI and all of the sort of, the speed with which this can accelerate I think it is the greatest threat to democracy.
I so much agree with Kelsey that this is where the problem becomes even more tangible. We have all experienced how quickly our algorithm can shift. One day, you click on a trending angry video and suddenly everything you see is hatred, conspiracies, and anti-democratic voices. And because the loudest, simplest, most provocative voices travel the fastest, it's so easy to start believing that they represent the public opinion, when, in reality, they only are a small, though extremely visible, part of the picture. Yet, while the social fragmentation pushes us toward darker places, there is another side to the story. Mistrust doesn't always lead to apathy or extremism. It can also become a spark, a call from renewal from below. When the old system no longer inspires confidence, people start rethinking what democracy could look like. And that's where hope can grow. After everything we've just talked about, the low trust, the polarization, the conspiracies, it can easily feel like we're rolling downhill. But sometimes, loving is caring, and struggling with trust can make you want to show up in entirely new ways. And repairing something is sometimes easier from the outside. Believe me, there are signs that people still care, even if not in the ways traditional politics would expect. By 2021, the OECD had collected more than 500 examples of deliberative processes around the world, with Europe leading the way. And the trend is rising, because more than 100 were organized only in 2019. But when I talked to Alex, he made a distinction I think is important. These innovations can help, but they are not magic fixes.
If you put a group of people together with very different opinions and you give them the right environment and the right information and everything to talk it out, this has a very good effect on these people. I think it cannot kind of fight societal polarization that is triggered by social media. It can help in, some ways by, for example, kind of if these citizens' assemblies propose policy solutions that a lot more people can live with than maybe if they were, proposed by a parliamentary chamber, then it can help alleviate the pressure a bit. But I don't think they are the solution to our problems simply because they are so, if you want to do them correctly, they are so pricey. I mean, in terms of money and hours and kind of participation, they cost so much that I don't think they are a viable way of kind of changing how we in society communicate with each other.
Alex is right. Citizens' assemblies won't magically cure polarization or a declining trust, but they do show something precious, that people don't necessarily shut down when Trump collapses. They search for new channels, new ways of being heard, new systems that feel fairer, more transparent. And this desire to keep power in check is exactly what can fuel engagement. Some scholars call this monitorial citizenship. People stepping into the role of watchdogs, constantly scanning for abuses, not because they hate democracies, but because they want it to work better. You can see this in the work of ActEU as well. Younger people expressed low trust in institutions, but very high engagement in local activism, volunteering, and issue-based campaigns. Disillusionment didn't make them hide. It redirected their energy toward causes they trust more than political institutions. And then there's the deeper point Kelsey made. Democracy doesn't need agreement to survive. It needs the right habits of disagreement.
All healthy democracies have disagreements because they represent citizens. If you're in a country where every single citizen has the same opinion, you're probably not in a democracy. You're probably in a major autocracy. So it's fine to have disagreements. It's more about the way that people disagree.
I love this point. Disagreement is not the enemy. What becomes dangerous is when we stop believing that disagreement can lead anywhere productive. Okay, let's pause here for now. Today, we went to some difficult places, and it was necessary to understand what really happens in a society when people no longer trust. The walking away, the anger that grows, the fractures when we stop sharing the same basic reality, the temptation of easy answers and easy way outs. But we also saw that decreasing trust can shake people awake, revealing exactly where the repairs are needed. If there is one thing I'm taking from this episode, it's that a democracy without trust is fragile, but a democracy without people is simply impossible. And people, despite everything, keep showing up. Maybe not where we expect or how we expect, but they do. And that, to me, remains a quiet source of hope. But this was only a first step in that direction. There is too much to say about how political participation is changing to stop there. Is the ballot box gathering dust? Or is there more to the picture? That's the story that we will explore in the next episode. Before we close, a quick reminder. Democracy Cracks is produced by TEPSA as part of the Horizon Europe project ActEU. I am Eva Ribera, Program Manager at TEPSA, and I'm the one behind this series. If you're curious about the data, studies, or research that inform what you've heard today, you will find all the references in the episode description. And if anything in this episode made you think, smile, question, or disagree, please reach out. I'm always happy to hear from you. See you next time.